So we're here at Rathangan in West Kildare, visiting this early medieval Rath. This is a royal site, very clearly, and it's massive. Rathangan, the Irish is Rath Iomghain, which is presumably a personal name. And it's extraordinary, it's a huge site. It's actually pretty simple. It's a kind of a raised platform wing fort, but it's surrounded by this massive bank and this huge ditch, and there's suggestions of a counterscarp bank outside this ditch. There's a causeway across into it here on the east side, and so you can see the scale of the ditches here and here. It's mentioned in the Annals in the early 9th century, in the Annals of the Four Masters for 801, when Flaithnia, son of Cineadh, Lord of Ui Failghe, was slain at Rath Imgain, and that's also in the Annals of Ulster for 805. You can see in the interior here the sheer scale of it. I mean, the bank isn't so pronounced when you get into the interior. The interior is slightly raised, so you're looking at an inner bank there of about, whatever, 2 metres, maybe a metre, maybe really. Depends where you're measuring it from. But the interior is massive. It's about 60 metres across here in diameter. So how do we know royal sites? Range of things. You can have bi-vallation, which is multiple banks and ditches up to 3 or 4. Prominent location would probably be important. Archaeological excavations would hopefully produce evidence for feasting and high status living, and maybe weaponry from a retinue under certain circumstances. Patronage of high status crafts, that kind of thing. You know, from excavations we've seen in places like Iran's and others. And historical references help as well. And perhaps most famously of all, I have it with me, is a poem translated by Kuno Meyer in his selections of Irish poetry, published in 1913. And this is a famous old Irish poem. So it goes, the fort of Rathangan. The fort against the oak wood, once it was bridges, it was cohils, it was aids, it was allils, it was cunnings, it was quillanas, and it was male dunes. And the fort remains after each in its turn, and the king's asleep in the ground. It's a lovely kind of poem in many ways, because it's about memory and place. How do we remember places? How do we remember people? How do we remember events? And one of the things I've said before about a royal site with, for example, multi-vallation, or something at a scale like this, look at the size of it. And here, I'll give you a sense of the banks and ditches as well. Look at this. Janie Mac. The sheer labour that went into digging that ditch and raising this bank and perhaps modifying the top of the hill here, that would live ever after, for generations, as a memory of a great event, and its modification and its redoing over the years, both in terms of lore, like in the poem, but also in terms of the physicality, the materiality of the site. It's a hugely impressive site. David Sweetman thinks that this site was modified in the 12th century by the Anglo-Normans to turn it into a ringwork castle. You can certainly see his argument. That looks like a Fogger sign collapsed. Yeah, and it's a national monument as far as I know. Rathangan. Let me read you that poem again. The fort of Rathangan, the fort against the oak wood. Once it was bridges, it was cohils, it was aids, it was allils, it was cunnings, it was quillanas, and it was male dunes. The fort remains after each in his turn, and the king's asleep in the ground. Imagine what this would have been like when the king was in residence with his court and his retinue and his followers. A terrific place for a geophysical survey to turn up all that kind of stuff. And here it is, 1,000 years later. Anyway, Rathangan 4.